welcome to Content Collective. I'm Josh, and this is the series which aims to make sure you are consuming the content that you want, getting the insights you desire, and can help you to live your best life. This week, we're back with 4 podcasts. These podcasts have topics ranging from what's going on behind the scenes at Neuralink, Elon Musk's company that are literally designing chips to go in your brain. We have the life story of Matthew McConaughey and how to live the life that you want.
To that I say, all right.
A sit down with MattDoesFitness, one of the world's biggest fitness YouTubers, talking about how you can get ahead in an ever-evolving world. Finally, we've got a discussion about finding your purpose and dealing with extreme emotions. Hi there, there's a question that I need to ask, and that question is, please, can you like, subscribe, and comment below? Okay, so let's get into it. The first podcast I've got was Andrew Huberman. This guy is a smart man. He's a neuroscientist and tenured professor at Stanford University. His podcast, Huberman Lab, tends to dive deep into how our brain works. His podcast, as you can imagine, is quite technical, going into the depth, the detailed knowledge of how everything works with the brain and the body. On this episode, he talked to Matthew MacDougall. Matthew is also a neurosurgeon and also studied and worked at Stanford University. And Matt's research at Stanford was looking into optical brain interfaces, which is basically being able to control a computer or other things with your brain. Matt is currently head of surgery at Neuralink, another one of Elon Musk's companies, which is literally designing chips to go into your brain. These chips could do anything from mind reading, access to all the information in the world, being able to instantly Google search, more realistically in the short term, being able to help people with disabilities, enable you to start moving your body if you're paralyzed, be able to speak based on your thoughts, that sort of stuff. As you can imagine, 2 neuroscientists going ahead, some pretty deep topics here. They do go into a lot of detail, very technical, but it is really interesting. And they provide some great insights to what's actually going on at Neuralink. So what is actually going on at Neuralink? They go for a number of projects on the show, some that they're working on at the moment. One, looking at helping quadriplegics. So people that brain is completely functional and fine, but they have some sort of spinal injury, which is stopping communication with the body. You've got the brain perfectly fine and can't control the body because there's that blockage with the spine. So what they want to do is put like electrodes in the brain to be able to bypass that, to be able to control things. And initially they're looking at being able to do that to just control computers. But how sick is that? We're in a day and age now where people are designing things that can go into your brain that will allow you to just control things in the real world. And I think ultimately with this, they'd like to be able to get to a position where you can just move your body normally. How amazing. They also talk through some of the current testing they're doing at the moment, like which animals they test with and why they use a pig for this and a sheep for this. Andrew also asked Matt what he thinks is possible at Neuralink, like what is really achievable, like pushing the boundaries. And his answer to that is, in his career, he thinks we can get to a stage where they're able to tackle things like addiction, obesity, and suicide. However, when pressed for like his children's lifetime, he could foresee there being like a full expansion of human cognition.
Wow.
An expansion into AI.
Wow.
Basically being like immersed into the internet, all tapped in.
Wow.
There'll be no limitations to what you can think.
Wow.
Communication in general would improve so much. You haven't got our primitive mouths trying to communicate and then listen and try and work out what people think or mean. There's so much like room for interpretation there. Whereas he's saying, we're going to have this chip in our head, which will literally tell you, that's what I'm thinking, exactly to the point.
You're actually onto something.
He even mentions that potentially we'd have like a hive mind type of thing where all the brains in the world are connected and there's like a massive thing going on. Andrew also asked Matt if he would be willing to have one put in him. And to be fair, Matt did seem fairly confident about the whole idea. They've had to do so many stringent testings, like to get FDA approval to be able to do any of the testing that they have been doing. But he did say at this stage, there's no real benefit for him to be able to get one of these chips because they're focusing on helping people with disabilities. As an able-bodied person, there's like no benefit to that at the moment. When the iterations come through and potentially it gets to a position where you can write on a computer quicker than you can type on a computer, or quicker than you could speech to text, that sort of thing, that's when he would be more likely to do it. And I think it's great that the FDA have signed things off. They've obviously done a lot of testing to make sure that the surgery to get the transplant in there goes well. But that's not the bit I'm worried about. I'm more concerned about having these electrodes through my brain at all times. Like, surely something could go wrong there. Metal detectors getting set off, wanting an MRI, I know, that's a bad thing to have metal running through your head, going through a magnet. So that side of things is where I'm not sure about yet. But this guy, Matt, he's already into augmenting his body. and is quite forward thinking in that regard. Matt has an RFID tag in his hand, which literally would allow him to open his front door, unlock his door at work. He even had some crypto stored in it. So this is a guy, clearly, that doesn't mind augmenting his body. This is a 2-hour podcast, and they go for a lot more than I've just jumped into there. They talk about the brain's health on alcohol, and how your brain literally shrinks and is dying when you drink a lot of alcohol. Nice to know. They talk about neuroplasticity and how mushrooms have more of an effect on their brains at the moment than they can do with electrodes. They talk about Bluetooth headphones, if there's any concerns with like the EMFs, electromagnetic fields, or the heat that comes off a Bluetooth headset. But I learned a lot from this one and it was really interesting, so if you want to hear more, link below. The second podcast that I'm going to go through is a show from Lewis Howes and his show, The School of Greatness. On his show, he interviews the world's most successful people from all industries with the aim to help inspire his listeners to unlock their inner greatness. In this episode, he interviews Matthew McConaughey, and this guy needs very little introduction.
All right.
He is one of the greatest actors of all time. He's featured in films from Interstellar, my personal favourite, Dallas Buyers Club, The Gentleman. Before that, he was Mr. Rom-Com. He's an Oscar winner. And since all of this, he's become an author with a book called Green Lights, which is one of my favourites. I actually have the book, unfortunately not here because my mum's borrowing it at the moment, because I was like, you need to read this, it's a really good book. Introduction was a little bit longer than I thought. But Matthew is such a great communicator and he comes across really well on this show. I think I even wrote about 6 or 7 different notes as I was going through listening to it of like different gems of wisdom. Really good stuff. First thing they talk about, or first thing I want to share, is they talk through his acting career and how he made that transition from Mr. Rom-Com to being one of the greatest actors. Now in this show, they do go through a few of the stories from this book. So if you're not a massive reader, this show is quite good to just get a lot of the key stories. So Matthew was Mr. Rom-Com. He was branded that way. That's the only work he could get. And he felt like something was missing. He felt like he could give more and wanted to do more. However, Hollywood's a bit like, you're Mr. Rom-Com. The audience is only ever going to see you in one sort of way. For example, you wouldn't see Danny DeVito playing Superman.
Great, now you... What in the hell? Oh, Jesus Christ!
He talked through all the offers that he was getting. Started off $4 million for a role. They up it to $8 million for a role. He turns that down. It goes up to $14.5 million for a role. And at this point, you see that number. You're reading that same script again. And he was saying it did start to sound like a better script. He was tempted. But he stuck to his guns. He said no. He wanted to move on to other things. But no one was offering anything. The fact that he turned that down, $14.5 million, sent a message to Hollywood. So this guy's not playing. This guy's serious. And at that point, maybe Hollywood were getting a bit more like, well, what's Matthew got going on over there? Turning down $14.5 million for a role. He felt like turning it down actually made him more attractive in the long run. And another positive was the fact that the number kept going up. He wasn't offered $4 million, then $2 million, then nothing else. Like, they really wanted him, so there was clearly something there. And that was a positive. So they talked through that whole thing, a lot more detailed, obviously, and a lot more charismatically delivered.
It's funny because it's true.
The second thing they talk about is how you've always got to make forward movements. Always got to move forward. You have to take risks. You have to try things. That's something that I really relate to, something that I'm always trying to do in life, always moving forward. Similar to Arsenal's motto, which roughly translates to always forward. Going forward in a direction, not necessarily the right direction, is still a positive action. If you're moving forward in a positive manner, working hard, moving forward, even if you don't know where the end goal is, even if you don't know what you ultimately want to do, and that could be paralyzing because you're like, I don't know what I want to do, what do I do? I'm not going to do anything. But by moving forward in a positive manner, you change your perspective. You're no longer here, you're here. And now you're here, you've got a different view in the world, a different perspective. And maybe the view here opens the doors or lets you see other paths that weren't visible here. So you've always got to move forward. Take risks, but don't worry about what people are going to say.
Hey, I'm sorry I didn't see you there. I was too busy blocking out the haters.
What Matthew says is, the people that are going to complain, the people that are going to say those things, these are the people on the sidelines. These aren't the people doing the thing. They're on the sidelines judging you because they know they're too scared to do anything. The people on the field, you come across the people on the field that are trying things, making mistakes, but trying things, they appreciate the fact that you're trying. They've been there. They're doing it too. They're trying. And it doesn't always work. But if you're trying, taking those risks, moving forward, then that's all that you need to do. So what if you make a mistake? We all make mistakes. We can learn and develop from that. You frame the mistake. It was a learning opportunity. But don't let people on the sidelines hold you back from your dream. Matthew also talks about the importance of writing things down. Matthew's a keen journaler, and through his journaling actually was the inspiration for the book. He had all his journals in the past and that helped him shape the book. But he's massive on writing things down, tracking things, making goals. On the show, he's asked, how important do you find writing things down, writing down a goal? How important is that if you really want to manifest that goal? Matthew's response was, it's a lot more important than we give it credit for. The fact that you're writing something down, you're physically pen to paper, writing down that goal, writing down the thing you want to achieve. At that point, it's outside of you, it's alive. It's no longer just like in your head, an idea. It gives it structure and it sort of ties it to you. And then at that point, it becomes more of a dialogue. You read that, it reminds you of it. Matthew set 10 goals when he was in college, and 30 years later, when he came back across them, he'd completed all of them. Now, these weren't little goals. One of them was winning an Oscar for Best Actor. At that point, he was in college. He wasn't going to be an actor. He was in film school to learn how to be like a director. He hadn't even considered acting, but he wrote the goals down. He stretched himself. And you've also got to stretch yourself. You shouldn't just put like 10 things that you can easily achieve. Me personally at the moment, having read his books, that's what actually got me into journaling. I don't journal much. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to preach journaling to you.
Here we go.
I'm just telling you, he's saying the benefits. I found some benefit myself, but I'm not a daily journaler. It's going to be every 3 or 4 months I'll remember the fact that I haven't journaled or a key moment in my life, and then I'll write something down, you know, try and get that momentum. But lo and behold, another 5-6 months passed and I haven't done anything.
Wow.
But goals is one thing that I'm trying to write down as well. What gets tracked gets measured. What gets tracked gets achieved. Personally, I found if I wrote down every day that I worked out on a calendar, a physical calendar in my room, put the X on the days that I didn't work out. I'm looking up at that, I'm seeing 5 or 6 X's in a row. And it reminds me like, you wanted to get into the gym, you wanted to get some momentum with it. You took 5 days off, what are you doing? But having that constant reminder there, writing it down. When you get back from the gym, you're feeling so good because you've had that gym session. And you write down legs, tick, done.
Hey, look at us. Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
Make it real, write it down, journal. The last thing on that as well is like, when you write it down, it's a contract with yourself. You wrote it down, you sign it, you've got to back it up. The last topic from this discussion that I'm going to talk about was they discuss how you find love. Now, finding love, according to Matthew, in order for you to find love, you need to be spiritually strong. You need to work on yourself first. When a relationship ends and you sleep in bed alone for that first time, you're left alone. And that could be a lonely place. So at that point, you can't blame anyone else. It's just you. So you need to go inwards and then work on yourself first. Another thing he mentions is like, stop trying so hard. Like if you're single, myself went through a breakup a couple of months ago, newly single. It's quite easy to then look quite hard to find a replacement, fill that hole. It's natural. But if you're looking hard, like anywhere you go, you're like, could she do? How about her? Ooh, yeah, no, maybe, potentially. But when you're doing that, obviously, that's not the way to do it. You're not going to be the most attractive person if you're like always like, yeah, where's the goals at? You're not.
You are creepy as shit.
If you're focusing on yourself and not worrying about all of that, you actually become more attractive because you're not eyes wide open, looking everywhere. Maybe the eyes wide open approach will get you someone. However, maybe it's not the person that you were meant to meet. Maybe you get it, but it ultimately isn't the right thing for you.
Oh my God. I get it.
Finally, the last thing with this one, I have one statement on gratitude. They talk through like the power of gratitude.
It's a scientific fact that gratitude reciprocates.
Gratitude is something that I've tried to be working on recently, especially with the breakup again. Notice like how good friends and family are, so I'm very grateful for all of that. And if you're grateful for a thing, you give that thing more value. It means more to you. If something means more to you, you take more care about it. If we care for something, if we look after something, it grows. So ultimately, being grateful leads to generosity. And being grateful is actually a self-service because it comes back around and actually helps you too. This was a shorter podcast, hour and 38. Great podcast, link below. Podcast number 3 was with Mike Thurston. Mike is a fitness YouTuber, has the body of a god. and has a very successful fitness channel, and has recently also ventured into the world of podcasting. His podcast, First Things First, has only been out for about 5 months, but really focuses on sharing insights into things from entrepreneurship, success, and fitness. On this episode, he has on a guy called Matt Morzier, more better known as MattDoesFitness. Matt is a YouTube sensation. He also has a very successful fitness YouTube channel, similar to Mike. He's a Gymshark athlete and an entrepreneur who used to be a PE teacher. And on this episode, they cover building a brand, optimizing your workflows, and leveraging your mindset to stay ahead in this ever-evolving world. They're also really good friends, have done videos together in the past, so have like a great relationship, and it's a great listen to just hear two friends chatting. On becoming a YouTuber, Matt's initial goal was to be an Olympian. He was a triple jumper, a fairly successful triple jumper, ranked about top 3 in the UK, competed internationally, but he was never going to make it. He'd be training for 10 years and there'd be like a 20-year-old from America, some genetic freak that just like beat his best by a meter with 0 training. So when he dropped out of the athletics, was a teacher, he had all this spare time to fill, he decided to get into YouTube. Now that's not really the done thing when you're a teacher. You're not really meant to have any social media presence. And then here's Matt with a YouTube channel, sharing to the world, this is me by the way. Luckily his school was really understanding about the whole thing, and he mentioned on the podcast if they were less understanding he probably would have sacked it all in. Which is crazy because he's one of the biggest fitness YouTubers out there. When he finally transitioned to doing the YouTube full time, he was going to be smart about it. Rather than just like end it cold turkey, his wife convinced him to drop to part-time. That way you're keeping some money coming in, even if you're making some dollar from YouTube. And I think that's like a really good approach to take with any sort of side hustle or thing that you're doing. Do the thing in your spare time. Work hard, get some sort of job. But if you don't know what you're gonna do, work hard, get a job. Get a job, earn some money. And then in that spare time, build. In that spare time, work on a side hustle. But until that point where that side hustle takes off, keep the main job, keep that income in there. It's a lot less risky. I'm not saying you have to do this, that's up to you. But a smarter way to do it is to do it that way. Don't just quit your job and start from scratch. Don't just one day think, I'm going to be a gaming streamer.
Peace and love, baby.
And then just quit your job and then start there and there. If that was a dream that you had, in the evenings, every day, you should be putting time into that. But until that point where that kicks off and does enough that you can potentially use that as a lucrative way forward, then you can look at quitting your job. They also give some really good insights about like behind the scenes of the whole YouTube video daily vlog. When Matt started, he did the whole process start to finish, recording the videos, come up with the ideas, editing, making the thumbnails. He did it solo for about 8 years. Now that's a very time consuming process. And a lot of the content were days in their life. What did they do that day? What breakfast did they have? Chuck in a workout, go meet a friend. But during this process, he would try and edit as he goes. And the benefit of that was after he's eaten his breakfast, and starts editing that down. As you progress through the day, you've got a better feel for how the video is going, which allows you to adjust as you go and make sure if you've missed certain key topics or the video needs a montage that you haven't covered yet, you're in a position to be able to add that stuff in as you go. Rather than doing a full days of filming, getting home, editing everything, realize you've missed a massive gaping hole in the story, and then having to do it all again. From that, he found the video quality was much better. But he found with this approach, he was spending a lot less time with his family, and that's not sustainable. He'd go away for like a family holiday, which would be great content, and then he'd record a series of him playing with his son in the sea, like a 2-minute time video in, chucking his son in the sea. He'd then go straight to his laptop and edit that for like the next 2 hours. Having someone do the brunt of that work for you, the editing, the videoing, really frees up so much more time for yourself. Now, Matt wanted to be involved in the full process still and found it hard to let go, as a lot of people do, but over time has been able to learn, delegate, that sort of stuff. And if you're editing for 12 hours, 12 hours is a lot of time. And maybe your time is worth more than the cost of someone editing it for 12 hours. This is applicable for business too. Hiring the right people in the right roles instead of doing everything yourself can be really daunting. It's your business, it's your baby, you don't want to let go. You don't want other people taking over. Or you don't think they're going to do as good of a job as you can do. But it's 100% needed if you want things to grow. Kevin Hart touched on this on a recent Impulsive podcast. He's built a massive team to really help him get to where he is in his career and his businesses. He said that you need to hire people. You need to hire specialists in their field. Ultimately, what it's about is letting other people add their value. It also frees up your time to really focus on the value that you add. If you're trying to be the ideas man, whilst also being the CFO, the operations manager, the editor, all of these things are taking up your time. You can't give 100% to each of these things. Hiring someone that can give 100% of their time to that one thing it's obviously going to have a better outcome than you spending 10% of your time on that thing and everything else is also suffering. But obviously it takes money to hire people and not every business has the money to hire all these people. So at the start of the process, you're probably going to have to do everything anyway. The last thing I want to mention on this podcast is Matt mentions how consistency beats intensity. For his YouTube channel to grow, or for any YouTube channel to grow, you can't be on and off. You need to be consistent. And that's the same with a lot of things. Matt was doing about 30 hours a week for 3 years, but was making no money. He would just be consistent. And at this time, he was getting like 200 views per video. He said he almost deleted his channel like 3 or 4 times.
Cap.
But he continued, he persisted. He said, you've got to be a bit weird to want to keep doing this stuff that's taking so much of your time that you're not getting any money for, that only about 200 people are watching. But he continued, he kept grinding, he was consistent. He was layering his paint, irrespective of what people are saying to you. In 7 years of videoing, I think he missed 3 Sunday uploads.
Cap.
And that's why he is where he is today, being able to branch out of the YouTube because he's built this base of people, millions of followers that he can now monetize. He also mentioned for people that have the excuse of, I don't have time. If you're saying you don't have time, what it actually means is, this isn't a priority for me. Ultimately, what it means is you don't care enough for it. To quote one of the greatest minds of our time, Molly May, we all have the same 24 hours in the day.
Beyonce has the same 24 hours in a day that we do. And I just think like you're given one life and it's down to you what you do with it.
How we choose to use those 24 hours is completely up to us. Obviously, we all have commitments, but you choose to spend your time. If you wanted to go to the gym, but you don't have time, you do have time. You're just prioritizing other things. You could get up at 5 a.m., go before work, but you probably prioritize sleep before. I definitely 100% will prioritize sleep in the morning and go to the gym early doors. If it was your top priority, you get it done. You go after work. You don't do it because you don't want it enough. If someone said to you, if you sit in this chair for an hour a day, 3 times a week, I'm gonna give you £1 million. Everyone is gonna go sit in that chair because it's gonna be important for you to be there. When you say you haven't got time, you're saying it's not a priority, which is fine. Just don't make the excuse that time's the issue. Say it's not your priority. For me personally, I always thought I never had time. I've always had ideas, want to start a business, do something else, but I just never had time for it.
Cap.
Whilst simultaneously playing video games every night for hours on end. They cover a lot more things in this pod, go into the claims that Matt is on steroids and how he tried to prove that wrong. They discuss genetics and they even discuss the flaws in the current schooling system. So if you like the sound of that, it's only 1 hour 40 and the link's below. The final podcast on today's show is the Jay Shetty podcast. Jay is a storyteller, podcaster, and ex-monk. His show aims at making wisdom accessible to his audience. Accessible in a practical way. The topics are usually about motivation, wisdom, love, relationships, that sort of stuff. And his guest today was Sam Harris. Sam is also a neuroscientist, but is more famous for being a podcaster, an author, a philosopher. His books and lectures tend to feature around morality, religion, and free will. As you can imagine, Sam's a pretty deep guy. If you're someone that ponders the topic of free will and can write a book about it, you're a pretty deep guy. Now I love a deep chat. The 2 a.m. in the smoking area deep chats. Pondering the universe and where we are in it. But that's not for everyone. So if you're not into deep chats, this probably isn't for you. One of the topics they discuss is a religion of the future. And they sort of talk about spirituality, that versus religion, how religion sort of is tribalism. There's been wars, countless wars fought over religions. And what we really need is a 21st century discussion about human wisdom, human happiness and spirituality. They're saying the way like religion's set up at the moment, you can have a 7th century discussion on it. You can have a 5th century BC discussion about it. But what we can do is realize there's a common wisdom between all of these and then have something that fits with where we are in today's age. So in this day and age, the changes of technology are incredible. We just chatted about Neuralink and how potentially we're going to be able to have AI in our heads. And our ancestors have come up with great things that have lasted and stood the test of time. Like there's some wisdom in that. There's a lot of valued information in that. What we need to think about is a common human project, and there should be a way to discuss that and talk about that transcends culture. We don't have a Japanese science and a Spanish science. Within the podcast, they say, like, you can take any religious text. There are plenty of stories in there that we willfully just ignore. Stories about sacrificing a lamb.
You think that's funny?
doesn't really mean too much to us now in the 21st century, and people ignore those parts. And then you've got other passages that are full of wisdom. A lot of them discuss the golden rule, which is basically do unto others as you would have done to yourself.
What goes around comes back around. Hey, my baby.
Treat other people how you would like to be treated. We're literally getting to the point now where scientists are able to manipulate your DNA. So all this legacy structures that we have in place, they weren't built for this. They aren't suited in the modern era. And at the moment, you can't find like one list with all the answers. It's not saying you should tear everything down and start again, because these things have worked for centuries. And there's a reason for that. But ultimately, we need a modern human wisdom tradition. That's what they're saying. And I sort of agree, which I'll touch on in a bit. On the topic of spirituality, you need an approach to well-being that isn't just fitness and being wealthy. Those things have their place, but ultimately spirituality is like, how can we pay attention to the current moment so we're not suffering unnecessarily? Because most of the time, people are just lost in thought, talking to ourselves. And meditation is a way that you can break through that. I've been trying to meditate. One of my goals
Oh shit, here we go again.
is to start building a meditation practice where I meditate in 40 minutes a week. Because one of the reasons you need spirituality is like you achieve a goal, you set a goal, I want to do a marathon. Complete that marathon and you are buzzing. But quite quickly, that moment's gone and you're already wanting the next thing. If you don't know how to meditate, you're also just like looking around all the time. You're not able to sink into the present moment. By sinking into the present moment, you appreciate that consciousness is actually quite peaceful. It's because of our thoughts that we feel like every moment is something we need to react to. I like this discussion because it does feel like there's a lot missing from society in this day and age. It feels like a lot of people don't have a purpose. People don't have a path. People don't have a way to live their lives in a meaningful way. But I feel like the hunger's there. My experience of speaking to people, listening to podcasts, is that there is a hunger for this sort of thing. And if we can take all the best bits from everything that's out there, put it all together, that with the new technologies and the science we've got today and going to continue to get, we can come up with a new wisdom tradition that serves everyone. Within this podcast, they also talk about how to deal with the death of a loved one and dealing with grief. And is grief a bad thing? If there was a pill to remove the feeling of grief, would you want to take it? They discuss outrage and how we react to different things, different situations differently when ultimately some things aren't that dissimilar. The last thing I want to mention with this one is something that Shetty does at the end of his podcast called the Fast Five. This is 5 questions that he asks where you literally have to respond with 1 sentence. And the one that I want to leave you with is actually in relation to meditation. And the question was, what is the best meditation advice that you've ever received? The answer, you are not this next thought. And that's it for this episode. Thank you so much. I hope you got some enjoyment from that. I hope there's some insights in there that can help change your life. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. If you know of any podcasts that you haven't seen mentioned on this show, but that you think was going to really add some value to people, please comment below.